Today we're going to talk about Facebook and its algorithms and a story that we saw in the Washington Post, which is that, that Facebook has repeatedly trended, well I'm reading the title here, has repeatedly trended fake news since firing its human editors. This is a story that we talked about back in May. If you guys remember, Gizmodo broke a story about, they claimed that Facebook was suppressing conservative media. That sort of enticed us to go and look at that, since we know an awful lot about what's happening on Facebook because of all the information and content flowing through us. And we found out that they were in no way suppressing conservative media at all. But this story, sort of iteration of the story keeps coming, because at one point it was humans were involved, and now it's basically almost the opposite. Humans aren't involved, so it's going the other way. So give me your take.
Yeah, so absolutely. This is going to continue to be in the news, I think. So Facebook did make the change to remove human editors from the process. Understand why they did that. There was a lot of controversy, but I think...
And they did that because the claim of the assertion was humans were putting their own
biases in there, right? And so the idea is, okay, we'll just turn it over to the algorithms. But the challenge, and we're seeing as written up in the story, is, well, the algorithms can be misled as well. And so the concern that's being stated is it's not so much bias as much as it is just fake news. There's a satire story or something that's outright false. If it gets a lot of clicks and it trends up, and there's no human involved to say, wait a minute, that's not false.
So not to be completely dense, but just for people that might understand. So if humans inject their own bias, which of course everyone tries not to, but some people do, and some people do intentionally, why would algorithms get tricked to fake news? Just, I know the answer, but I just want you to...
Well, sure. It's not that the algorithm is being tricked. It's just the algorithm is doing what you programmed it to do. And if you, in a very simplistic sense, say, I'm going to treat trending content as the content that gets the most clicks, and then there's a satire piece that's complete fiction that gets a tremendous number of clicks, and that's treated as trending real news, and there's no interpretation that this is satire or just outright false. So, well, the algorithm doesn't know any better. The algorithm's responding to what it was programmed to do, which is to trend content that got a lot of clicks. Now, it turns out those algorithms are a lot more sophisticated than just clicks, and they're constantly developing, tuning, and trying to adjust the algorithms to get the best possible result. And there are lots of ways you can try to discern what may be true from not. You know, is it referenced by other citations? There are lots of things. So it's very much a work in progress with these algorithms.
Because you could, for instance, you could definitely let the algorithm know that if it comes from The Onion,
then that's a satire site. Yeah, that's actually a great example. Sometimes you will essentially hard code things in to say this is a satire site, so you should treat things as satire. But the New Yorker has a satire column, but all of the New Yorker is not satire, but there isn't one author that's satire. So there's some
Andy Borowitz. Yeah, someone the other day asked me if Andy Borowitz's article was true, and I know Andy, and I used to have him on a CNN show regularly, and luckily I was able to quickly answer no, what he does is satire.
Intentionally satire.
But you could see how A, people might believe it because it's the New Yorker, and B, if it trends on Facebook, then why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you take it as face value?
That's exactly right. But there's an important point here, I think, and one of the things I wanted to do today is let's tease out a little bit about what exactly we're talking about. I mean, these algorithms are not just one monolithic piece of code. It turns out there's many algorithms used in many different ways across Facebook and elsewhere. SocialFlow uses algorithms. We work with the world's biggest media companies. Our algorithms help determine which of their content is going to slot into what content windows and get the best result for them. So we use algorithms, but we're also big fans of human editorial judgment. Right. Our clients are some of the biggest and most prestigious media companies in the world, and they make great judgment. So we think there is a really important role to be played both for human judgment and algorithms together. And what I wanted to do is dive in and show you a couple of examples here, both on my desktop and on my mobile device, about what exactly we're talking about.
Sure.
Okay, so let's start with the mobile device. So the story originally was about the trending content section, and on the desktop experience you can see that it's on the right side of your screen, and you see the trending content section, and you can see what happens to be trending up or down at a given time.
Right.
But the vast majority of Facebook usage comes on a mobile device.
Right.
Like 75-80% of the usage comes on a mobile device.
Yep.
When you open up the mobile device and you open up Facebook in here, you try to see, okay, what content is trending. There's no way to actually see what content is trending unless you actually click in this search box up here, and then you'll see the trending content. But most people, when they open up Facebook, don't immediately go to the search box to see what's going on. They look at their newsfeed and they scroll through the content in their newsfeed. That's the use case.
I remember when the original story came out about trending. I think I asked people around our I always want to say newsroom, but our work area.
Yeah.
All habits die hard, obviously. But I remember asking them how many people, because they all look at Facebook on their phone. How many actually look at trending topics on here? And none of them even knew how to get there.
Right.
So
You had to go. I mean, it's such a rare use case that unless you just happened to notice and you wanted to search for something and you noticed that there was something trending.
Right.
So it is not by any means the dominant use case. In fact, I would submit it's a fairly rare use case in terms of how most people use Facebook.
Agreed.
So that's an important distinction to note, that the trending section is a fairly small section in terms of usage. Now, Facebook is massive. They've got 1.7 billion users, so even a small percentage of 1.7 billion is a large number in absolute terms. But in terms of how people use Facebook, this is not a dominant use case. But there is a dominant use case that we are going to talk about, and I'm going to demonstrate this on the desktop here just because we've got more real estate. And so if you scroll down through your news feed, again, and this is how most of us consume Facebook. We sit there and scroll through our news feed, typically on a mobile device, maybe on a desktop. You find a story. It's not going to be hard to find a story about the election right now. Given everything that's going on, I find one here from the election. I click on it, and you'll notice that right below, before I click on it, there's another post that's completely not related to the one I'm getting ready to click on, because right now Facebook doesn't know if I'm interested in this post or not. It thinks I might be because I've clicked on content like this in the past.
Sure.
Once I click on the story about the election, and then the window pops up, and let's say I read the story, if you go back to Facebook, you now see there's another box down below that wasn't there before. And in this case, it's called People Also Shared. Sometimes it's called Suggested Videos if it was a video. It all falls in the general content category of related content. And Facebook is using algorithms to surface that. And so the first point I would make is the trending section and what may or may not be happening in the trending section is interesting. This, I think, is far more relevant in terms of actually what's generating traffic and clicks. And if you look into that related articles section, you'll see a variety of things that have been algorithmically determined. And so, again, here's another case where algorithms are determining what you're seeing based on behavior you've exhibited in the past. Now, one of the things that Facebook, because it's their platform, they don't necessarily disclose which algorithms are doing what at what time. So there's no way from the outside looking in to know exactly how those algorithms work, which is, I think, what creates some of the anxiety people feel.
If they did, though, would we be any the wiser? I mean, you might be like, what algorithms are doing what?
Well, I think the reality is, again, algorithms are constantly tuned. Hey, we should put in here a note saying The Onion is a satire site, to use our previous example. I mean, who's going to know that somebody recoded something to change, to reflect the changing landscape? Maybe there's a new satire site that starts gaining popularity, not just The Onion, there's something else. I mean, how and when would that be put in? So these algorithms very much are very much dynamic creations. It's not like I create one algorithm and I just leave it for a year and come back. They're constantly being tuned. And I think that's one of the things Facebook is trying to do, is make sure when they tune those algorithms that they deliver a really good user experience, and B, that they address some of the concerns that were expressed about is there potential for manipulation of the conservative media, things like that. And I know Facebook's position is the algorithms have a better chance of being sort of apolitical and unbiased than humans do. And so let's focus on the algorithms. Our view is we're huge fans of algorithms, but we still think that human judgment on the editorial side from the media clients ends up being incredibly important.
So it's a complicated relationship, but it's one that sort of has to work in conjunction. Like you can't really have one or the other.
Exactly. And I know that's sort of been one of the narratives of the question is, can algorithms do it all? Can humans do it all? And there is no perfect solution. Humans come with their implicit biases. Algorithms come with the biases based on how they were programmed. And they may not be biases intentionally, but going back to our example is if you coded the algorithm to recognize a certain type of behavior, it's going to recognize that behavior. So
it totally reminds me, I read yesterday President Obama's interview with Wired magazine. They were talking about artificial intelligence, the way it relates to driverless cars. And everyone says, or conventional wisdom now says, there'll be less accidents. However, how do you arm artificial intelligence with, I think President Obama called it our values, meaning, you may have to, in order to avoid a crash, you could avoid a crash which spares the life of the driver and the passenger, but it could kill 25 people. So you may have to arm the artificial intelligence with the fact that, no, in this case, take out the driver and the passenger, but save the crowd. And that's a very tricky...
It is, and I think you have to, not to bring everything back to the election, but it's the most obvious in-our-face example of, you ask two different people their perspective on a common event, the election, and you'll get two very, very different answers potentially based on who you ask. That's true on these complicated ethical questions too. With the driverless car example, when you're having to decide in a terrible case, whose life is saved or whose is not. Well, it depends on who you ask. You're going to get very differing differing answers. And I think that's true of all of these algorithmic things, and it just really highlights the challenge that just because it's technology and algorithms does not take the human element and some of these really moral and philosophical questions that come up. I mean, they're going to remain whether there are algorithms there or not.
Right. Do you think the more we know, last sort of point, I guess, I think the more that we know, the general public, consumers, content consumers, I think the more they know about algorithms, the better off they are in terms of they may be better armed to sort of deal with these sort of outliers, or at least be ready for sort of the outliers.
I am a huge fan of people understanding how the content they consume reaches them and what the biases or implicit biases that could be in there are. That lets us be better informed, better citizens, better human beings in terms of just interacting with other humans. So I think, the more that people understand about how these algorithms work, what's the trending section. And again, the challenge again with this technology is I spend all day, every day dealing with this kind of thing, and sometimes I can't keep up. So I understand that if you have a life outside of social media, which hopefully most people do, that it's awfully bewildering to try to keep up with these changes. And again, that's why we exist for our clients, and we help the media companies try to adjust to these algorithms, and again, use them in the right kinds of way, make the right kinds of human judgments to ultimately deliver high quality content to people on their devices and in the way where they can consume it, so that they can sort of be happy, entertained, informed, whatever the purpose of the content is.
Brilliant. And speaking of, you mentioned interactions, we hope everyone will interact with us, and if they have any questions, comments, please let us know, and we'll try and get to them either individually or the next time we do one of these Facebook Lives. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us.